Welcome, viewers and listeners, to the Thinking Fan FC Premier League podcast. Each week, we get together with our besties who are current pro players, real coaches, academics, and stat heads. Today, I'm joined by soccer analyst Harshal Patel and professional footballer Dre Fortune. I'm host Chris Mumford. Bella Ciao. We're welcomed by the Premier League Guide, a 300-page book for those mad about football. Moneyball for soccer, opposition analysis plus eye candy. The current update is at www.thinkingfanmedia.com and on Amazon. Match day 32 was pretty ho-hum in the Premier League. The Champions League semifinals had some interesting elements, and the FA Cup had some nice bits and pieces to talk about. But the big news is the emergence of this European Super League, which is so massive it even swallowed the Spurs sacking of Mourinho. Harshal, help us unpack what's going on with all this European Super League news.
So basically what's happened is that 12 clubs across Europe's sort of biggest leagues, although it must be said that there are no representatives from Ligue 1 in France or the Bundesliga in Germany at the moment. 12 clubs, of which 6 are from England, have decided to break away from UEFA's competitions, the Champions League, the Europa League, the UEFA Conference League, Europa Conference League, which is going to be introduced in the summer. So they've broken away from UEFA and formed their own European competition called the European Super League. There are 12 clubs who signed up for this at the moment, but there are apparently going to be 3 more clubs who are going to join as founding members, with further 5 places to be determined through qualifications every year. And although we do not know how this qualification is going to be determined, but the key point here is that this move means that they will not be playing in the Champions League and the Europa League from next season onwards, because the statement says that they plan to begin this tournament as soon as possible, and reports are that it could begin from August, from the next season. And that is going to be a huge blow to UEFA, because it's essentially an existential crisis for UEFA at the moment. Because if you don't have the likes of Liverpool, Real Madrid, Manchester United, Barcelona, Man City, Chelsea, Juventus, Inter Milan, AC Milan, all of these clubs are not going to be part of UEFA's premier competitions. It's going to be I don't see how those competitions can stay relevant or how they can survive in the near future. But at the same time, I don't think anybody was expecting, I don't think the reaction has been unexpected. It's been almost unanimously condemned by fans, journalists, people in the government and in the opposition in the United Kingdom. A few players have also come out to sort of voice their disagreement with these plans. And it'll be really interesting to see how the next few weeks go, or just the next couple of days, because this has huge ramifications to just this season itself. I mean, consider the fact that the Champions League semifinals have City versus Real Madrid and PSG versus Manchester City. 3 of those 4 clubs are part of the Super League. So, I mean, how does it make sense for them how will the semifinals, which are going to be held in a couple of weeks' time, have any relevance or be still, how do you take that competition seriously anymore when 3 of those 4 clubs have said that we're not going to be part of it from next season? And we've already got it on record, apparently, from a UEFA executive that all the clubs who are part of the Super League will be removed from UEFA competitions for this season, which means that Arsenal and United would also get kicked out of the Europa League semi-final. So it's going to be a very interesting next few days as we get more and more news about this.
Dre, what's your take on this?
Honestly, I'm still developing my thoughts, but I think initially I'm not too much in favor of it. Just, I mean, there are so many ways to approach it. I think when you approach from a financial standpoint, you look at competitions like, for example, the FA Cup, and when a team in, League One, for example, makes a run, gets to host a Manchester United or an Arsenal, and the revenue it brings in, how much the fans enjoy those moments, even for the players. I mean, everybody dreams to play against the best teams and best players in the world. So, taking that away from all the players and the fans, I think, is a big thing. And then also, I think people fail to realize that we really appreciate the big games because they don't happen all the time.
Yep.
So if Barcelona is playing who, Man City
United.
every week, right?
Yeah.
Well, Man City. But yeah, if they're playing, every other week or whatever the case may be, then the game loses its that special value that it has because we get to see it in Champions League. So yeah, for me right now, I'm not too invested in it, and I don't really see what the positives to it would actually be. I'd be interested to hear, I guess, what your take may be on it, Chris, and how you would spin that.
Well, I think in previous podcasts, y'all know my view on this. So I work in innovation, and our start point is always let's accept reality for what it is. And the reality is that we have these things called leagues, which are not, they're processions, right? Ligue 1, Bundesliga, La Liga, Premier League, all except for 2 of the last 28 years in the Premier League. The usual 4 or 5 suspects have won, Leicester being the most recent example, right? So I, as a neutral, admittedly pretty neutral, I'm kind of tired of seeing the same processions. It's like when La Liga started this year, there were 2 teams that had a realistic chance. A third team made it interesting. But I just in the last 2 or 3 years, Man City or Liverpool. And people say, "Oh, these big super clubs are doing it for the money." The dirty secret is everybody does this for the money. Why does Crystal Palace play such cynical football, parking the bus, right? It's because they want to stay in the Premier League. They're not doing it to play exciting football. And I just feel like, look, the fundamental platform for this whole thing is that capitalism has a downside. If you let teams that can make a whole lot more money compete against teams that can't generate as much money, you're going to have these gross inequities. Now, if someone came back and said, cool, let's do what the Germans do, and let's have fan communities own the clubs, and Dre, I know you're not going to be happy about this, some sort of salary cap where things are kind of fair, right? Because the leagues are not fair at all. They are just flat out unfair. So at least in the European Super League, you're going to have 15 teams that are more or less spending the same amount of cash. So maybe it's interesting, right? But let me tell you something. Watching Man City play Burnley, watching a basically a flamingo try to crack open a muscle for a win, that's not entertainment for me. I'd rather go dig a ditch.
Well, Chris, I want to challenge you on that a little bit though, because
okay,
I mean, who would you say are 2 teams in the Premier League that you like to watch the most?
I'll give it. Give me a chance to explain. Liverpool and Leeds.
Right.
And as a Leeds fan, I am happier now that they're getting rid of the 6 teams that have just a gross payroll, so I can watch Leeds play in a competitive league. They would be 3rd in the Premier League now if all the other guys were gone. That's exciting to me.
Well,
right?
I don't know. The reason, because I think when you go into a season, I think, and you have to keep in mind these majority of the fans, and I'm not excluding us, but the passion that goes into supporting their team is much deeper than just, Crystal Palace fans don't expect Crystal Palace to win the Premier League. They know they're not going to.
Exactly. Yeah.
But why not? Why can't in the first day of any given season, we have a league where, and I'm not necessarily a huge National League football team fan, but any given year, a team could go and win that.
There's a reason for that, Chris. There's a reason for that. So, I mean, if you're trying, admittedly, this has been sort of pushed by the Glazer family, the Kroenke family, and the FSG group, which owns Liverpool, the 3 American owners of the Premier League teams, and who are trying to sort of bring the American model into European sports. But they're not doing it in a complete manner, because can correct me if I'm wrong, obviously, because my knowledge of American sports is not extensive. You guys would obviously know better. But from what I understand, most, if not all, American sports, which are closed shops in the sense that there is no qualification or promotion or relegation, also
That is
have
correct.
drafts and also have salary caps. That is what makes it equitable. What's the point of, so what's going to happen with the Super League in this current guise, and assuming that they're still allowed to play in the domestic leagues, is basically that a Man United or a Man City or Chelsea, for example, in all of the 15 clubs, basically, they've been told that they'll get up to 400 million euros a season from just playing in the tournament. Forget about winning. It's about playing. A team, and I was going through some of the numbers earlier, you get only about 10% extra for winning the tournament than you do for just playing in the group stages, which is the complete opposite of the Champions League. In the Champions League, if you win the Champions League, you get, I think, up to, I forget the actual number, but in percentage terms, your revenue, if you win the Champions League, is 300 times, or not 300 times, 300% of what you would get if you were in the group stages. Now, what that means is the English clubs, for example, the 6 English clubs, if they're going to play in the Super League every week, earn 400, 500 million more per season, and then come back and compete in the domestic leagues, how is that going to make it more equitable? They're just going to have more money to go out and buy whoever they want from a Leicester and Aston Villa, a Burnley and Everton or whatever. And the domestic league is going to get even more entrenched. There's no way any other club will be able to break into the top of the league. And to be honest, we have Leeds versus Liverpool tonight in a couple of hours' time. That game has completely lost its relevance now, because if you're not going to qualify for the Champions League anymore, what's the point of Liverpool even trying to go out and win this game? Because even if they finish 4th, they're not going to play in the Champions League next season, apparently.
Because Leeds will be able to potentially go to the Champions League, while as yet they will not under the current arrangement, right? And keep in mind,
the Champions League, what you're saying, Chris, I get that. But now the Champions League has been devalued as well. If you're not going to have,
I agree.
And
but
so
let me respond to what you said earlier, Harshal. Basically, you're saying, well, if you win in the new European Soccer League, you only get 10% more by winning versus everything else.
So it's not about sporting merit at all.
To me, it's actually about they are saying to the clubs, it's more important for you to put out entertaining football that fans want to watch, rather than winning at all costs. So it gets rid of the Atletico Madrid cynical negative football. It's,
by the way,
go out and
are part of the Super League. Atletico are part of the Super League.
I agree. And they're going to have to figure out a way
I will
make it entertaining.
I will contest that point in the sense that, yes, it's about entertainment, but not about entertaining football. It's about basically making football clubs or football matches into content. You want them to play Real Madrid 3 or 4 times a year, so you can sort of market and highlight these marquee matches. But it doesn't matter if they win or lose. And it's and one of the statements that is made in the ESL sort of founding document or whatever that's doing the rounds is that it's about sporting merit. How is it about sporting merit? Arsenal have not only recently started to play in the Champions League, but I mean, if you're looking at sporting merit, Aston Villa have more European Cups than Arsenal or Spurs or Man City. Nottingham Forest have won more European Cups than these clubs. Everton have more league titles than City and Arsenal combined. So it's not about sporting merit. It's about Arsenal are finishing. Arsenal are finishing 9th or 10th in the league this year, and you're telling me they're good enough to be a part of the European elite.
Well, what I am saying is
on a permanent basis, without any qualifications or without any. All right, go on.
But Harshal, what has Aston Villa done for us in the last 4 or 5 years? Right? I mean, let's call a spade a spade.
They've given us Jack Grealish. They've given us some absolutely entertaining football.
Okay. All right. Versus the entertainment that Arsenal has given us. I mean,
yes. I absolutely empathize with you here.
And let's let Dre chime in on this because he's an Arsenal fan. But what's your take on
I genuinely think just for this small micro point, I think Aston Villa have been more entertaining than Arsenal over the last 2 or 3 years.
Okay.
I don't think any club would be more qualifying. I think I can agree with they haven't been at that level recently, but I don't think I would put any other team above them I don't think I'd put Villa ahead of them or Everton or any of those clubs.
Yeah, I know. My point is basically that they're talking about the most sort of prestigious or historical clubs in Europe getting to keep a seat at the table so that they can continue playing. Basically, these 15 clubs will never be booted out of the Super League, right? My point to that is that, I mean, if you look at history, there are a lot more clubs who are not doing as well now. I mean, look at Leeds, for example. They're a very historical club. They've been very successful in England. They've won multiple titles, but they're just not. And this is a point that Alexander Sefrin, who's the president of UEFA, made in his statement today, that it's a cycle. Clubs that are doing well right now may not necessarily be doing well 10 years down the line. And we've seen that in the Premier League as well. And it's just that because at the moment you have these clubs that are on top, it's not necessary that 10 years down the line that they will still be there. But this system, if it is put into place, will ensure that that is the case. And that's a problem because sporting merit goes out of the window.
Yeah. Dre, what's your read on this?
What do you mean? Like what specifically?
Well, I mean, Harshal and I have dominated the airtime. I want to make sure your views represented on this. Let me chime in on one piece here. Let me give you an analogy. Let's say Dre and I we start playing football. Now I'm an old guy, and Dre's dynamic center attacking midfield player, and we're doing competitions, and Dre is able to generate a lot of attention for our league because he's very good, and I'm just kind of barely hanging on, right? And then Dre decides, you know something, I'm going to start a league with 4 or 5 other guys that can ball, and say, Chris, I'm really sorry, but you can't play in that other league there. And guess what? It's the TV execs are talking to Dre. That's why income is coming into the league. I have to accept the fact that I'm not at Dre's level. I have to accept the fact that, hey, maybe I can get a TV contract, and maybe we can go back to our history where let's focus on our fans locally instead of chasing Sky and BT and NBC, and let Dre and his guys do what they can do. And I've got to be happy doing what I can do, becoming very much more fan centric.
Well, I think that also that would kind of cap off your, I don't know, what potential, I guess, because then you're going to stop trying, in the analogy, to beat me. And then, you know, the people who are supporting you and whatnot, they want to see you beat me. You know what I mean? They want to push you. They want to see you. They want to see your story, your improvements.
But Dre, most of the paying people to NBC and Sky and all that, they don't really want to see me play. They want to see you play against good competition, right? They want to see you play against the top 6. That's just, as a neutral myself, I will watch other top 6 games. I will not watch Manchester United play West Brom.
Yeah, but you'll watch Leeds play Liverpool.
Well, that's because I'm a Leeds fan and I'm a Liverpool.
Right, but that's what I'm saying. Right, it's the same thing. So, like, the point being,
West Brom fan would want to watch.
Right, of course, and all of that, and it goes all the way around, which is I think a very valuable.
Also,
point.
I mean, also there's a wider point here in the sense that, especially in England, but across Europe, clubs are a lot more than just. I mean, football clubs are a lot more than just, you know, a sports team that you're supporting on the weekend.
Mm-hmm.
They're hubs of the community. They make a huge difference in people's lives. I mean, we won't understand that because we're not in the UK. I'm obviously thousands of miles away, as are both of you. But for local fans, it makes a huge difference to their lives if their club or their team wins or loses on the weekend. So
why can't they pick a local club?
No, they do. They obviously do. I'm talking about
that's focused on that versus there are only 6 clubs that are globally globally oriented.
Yes, but by doing that, by breaking away, you're making the domestic competition basically irrelevant, because one of two things can happen here. Now, either in the case of the Premier League, either the big 6 are tossed out of the Premier League, in which case the Premier League will become a less attractive proposition, if not for fans, for fans obviously globally, but also for broadcasters, for sponsors. The amount of money that comes in from the broadcast deals, for example, which is what makes the Premier League so exciting will definitely go down. So that's obviously going to make a difference to all the clubs' balance sheet and the revenues that they earn. That's the first scenario. So you yourself.
Harshal, so
No. So what's going to happen here is
if Dre only makes 10 million a year instead of 20 million a year, I think Dre's going to be able to make it work still. I mean,
But Chris, another
but
thing
that's
too,
the
though, I
thing.
think because, for example, like you've used the example, you're not going to watch Burnley Man City.
Yeah.
For me, I love that game, and I love that game because
It's the classic
City,
underdog story, right?
and not even just from that perspective. City has to find a way to break down Burnley. We know how Burnley's going to play, and I enjoy watching that. And now
Yep.
that's my personal opinion versus your personal opinion, whatever the case may be. But if you're not going to watch that, you're definitely not going to watch Burnley play West Brom. I know that for a fact.
Yeah.
The Premier League is going to lose all interest at that point.
Relevance.
Yeah, I mean, nobody's going to watch that.
Relevance. It's going to have you just made the case that it's going to make a lot of difference for Burnley fans and West Brom fans. So let's just keep it as West Brom and Burnley fans.
No. So what's going to happen, as I was saying earlier, if the big six break away, they get to earn maybe 3, 4, 5 times more money, while the rest of the Premier League sees their earnings probably cut in half. That's if they break away.
Probably less than
If they
half.
stay, yeah.
No, I agree.
If they stay, that's option number one. Option number two is there is a European Super League that takes place, but they also compete in the Premier League. In that case, yes, fine. Maybe the broadcast deals don't go away, but the product itself still gets massively devalued because, as I said earlier, those clubs will have an even bigger advantage in terms of the revenue they earn. Not that they don't already. They already earn a lot more than, obviously Man United earn a lot more than Leeds or a West Brom or a Burnley, for example. But they're going to earn even more and have even more money to go out and buy any good players from the guys competing below them. So then
And
it
they
becomes,
will do it.
yeah,
And they will do it
there's
'cause
no
they need the
reason to
depth.
say they won't do it. And
Mhm.
Premier League will become a closed shop as well. So then there's what you were saying earlier that, you're saying that only the usual contenders are sort of competing at the top of the Premier League. That'll become even more entrenched. There's no chance then whatsoever of a Leicester happening ever again.
But Harshal, the truth is this: Burnley's in 17th place at 33 points, right?
And they're fine with that.
Man City is at 74 points. So there's 41 points difference there. Okay.
So,
Versus, let me finish, versus Tottenham at 50 versus Burnley at 33. That's 17 points. Okay. To me, the league is much more interesting when it's just the band is narrower there, because that means at least there's a semblance of competitive parity. Now it's a complete farce. This is not a competitive league, the Premier League. You've got 6 teams, maybe 8 at most, and then you've got everybody else. And I just feel like we need to.
How are you saying it's not a competitive league, Chris? Chris, how are you saying it's not a competitive league in a season where West Ham are in the top 4 and Leicester are in the top 4?
Mhm.
How is it not competitive? Spurs and Arsenal aren't even in the top 4. Neither are Chelsea.
Okay, so
in the top 6.
Top 6, yeah.
Okay, so let's have a conversation in 4 weeks and see where this goes. But West Ham, if you look at the teams that they have to play in the next few weeks, they're probably not going to be in the 4. And it's going to be
Chris, you would have never guessed ever one time that West Ham would have.
Would you have said at the start of the season
chance
that West Ham would have been third?
Absolutely not.
Exactly. That's the point.
By virtue of the fact that there's one outlier doesn't justify the argument.
I don't think it's one.
Way, just because Leicester won once in 28 years. So that's great. So 3% of the time, a non-favorite wins in the league. That to me is not a league.
Chris, fair enough, but that's the thing. I think that's the fundamental difference between maybe sort of the American view of sports versus maybe European, where as I said earlier, American sports are a lot more about all teams being on an equal footing, where any team can come in with more competitive balance. Whereas in Europe, this has always been the case. It's not been obviously financially inequality has been a lot.
Europe is a caste system, right? Where the big elites stay the big elites, and everybody else, you're lucky if you get bits and pieces, and 3% of the time you get the limelight.
I mean, it's phases though. It goes through phases because there have been, when you look historically, the same teams don't stay on top forever. I mean, Manchester United, that's what makes them such
They
a great team
have.
because over the courses, over years and years and decades, they've
But-
stayed there. But when you look at, for example, as Harshal mentioned,
I mean, Liverpool,
Villa-
they won the first title in 30 years.
yeah, I mean that's
So
incredible.
they had not been at the top for a while.
Teams like
United are
Leeds,
going through a
Nottingham,
downturn
Villa.
right now.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I mean,
exactly.
But
it's always
y'all-
changing.
If y'all look at the top four for the last 28 years, you're going to see the same names.
No, you won't.
Just
You won't
fact-
see Manchester City the same. You won't see
Arsenal, you won't see
Arsenal,
Spurs,
yeah,
you won't see
you
United
won't.
at times, you won't see Chelsea at times.
I,
Maybe 4 of the 6 or maybe
I'll
3 of
tell you
the 6.
what,
I get
by
the
time
wider
we
point you're
get-
making, Chris.
Yeah, by next week, I'll be able to show you that
Huh.
you see the usual suspects particularly in the last 10 years, certainly.
But you know,
Right.
Manchester City only recently became
I agree.
And that's also
Chelsea-
because they
and
were
Chelsea-
bought by Abu Dhabi.
That's right. And Chelsea as well, a Russian oligarch. I get that. But that is more of what's going to happen. And I would rather have parity in a league and say, cool, capitalism is broken for purposes of European football. So let's get back to a point where we have some parity, because the idea of sport is to have parity and see who wins. Everybody plays by the same rules. Right now, we're not playing by the same rules. Man City plays completely different rules than a West Brom or a Burnley do. Right.
That only works, Chris. That only works. What you're saying and what the European Super League is trying to do only works if you bring in a salary cap, if you bring in transfer restrictions like a draft or something of that sort. They're not going to do that, which is what is the essence, which is basically what tells you what the main ambition here is. If the ambition was to create a more level playing field, to try and have more equitable competition, to have more winners, they would have done that. They would have included proposals to have a salary cap, to have some sort of transfer restrictions between clubs. They're not doing that. This is blatant opportunism and greed, where you have this much of the pie, we want a lot more. And I mean, just to make one final point, there was a segment on Sky Sports earlier today where one of the journalists was talking, he cited an unnamed source at basically an unnamed director who sits on the board of one of the 6 Premier League clubs. He obviously didn't name who he was or which club it was. But what he said was that director told him that a lot of people within these clubs at director level, at boardroom level, are not in support of this, but they can't really go against the owners. B, the owners basically believe that their first and foremost duty is to increase their revenues and increase their profits, and that the health of the wider game is a secondary concern, quote unquote. So that tells me that, I mean, as that quote suggests, all they care about is deepening their own wallets and the wider game of football be damned, which is why, as a football fan, I am not happy with this.
So I couldn't agree more with that. We have a football system on capitalism, which rewards inequities over time and exacerbates them. And guess what? It creates oligarchs and monopolies. That is the ultimate end game. So the leagues have been complicit in the growth of
Absolutely,
all this.
I'm not denying
They're
it.
happy to
Yeah.
take the TV dollars, except when the TV dollars decides to go to another league, right? So UEFA is getting all sanctimonious about this idea of, oh, we have to protect the game. Well, that didn't seem to be the problem when you were negotiating with Sky Sports and BT a few years ago, right? So I think this whole greed and blah, 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 everybody's been in this for the money. We are in a capitalist society. You have to assume that that's a first principle. Unless, of course, you decide to go to a German model where the communities and the fans own it, but that's not capitalism, right? That's socialism, okay? And I'm okay with socialism if we all agree to socialist tendencies in sports if there's parity, because to me, the number one principle is parity. But I find it a little obnoxious that these guys, particularly FIFA, who's been benefiting and trying to extract as many dollars from people as possible, to get to a point where, you know, we have to recognize reality for what it is. Yeah.
Yeah, I agree with that. I mean, it's not too different from 1992 when the founding members of the Premier League sort of broke away from the English Football League to create the Premier League. It's not that different, to be honest. But it's, as I said, the problem is that it's a closed shop, that only 5 teams will qualify. And I mean, again, if you look into the document, the way the revenue is split is also massively skewed towards those 15 teams. The 5 teams that qualify get a much, much smaller share of the pot than the 15 sort of founding members. So it's not about equity there either. And as I said, if it was about equity, you would have heard discussions, or there would have been some talk about implementing a salary cap and transfer restrictions, but that's not going to be the case.
Okay, but Harshal,
So all this is going to do, if it does sort of happen,
Harshal, isn't Euros and the World Cup a closed shop? They are the sanctioning body. If you are unsanctioned, then you can't participate. You can't
No, but that's-
these competitions.
that has nothing to do with money and revenue, right? That's just geographical.
The truth is that UEFA have a closed shop now, right? Who else is competing against UEFA? Who else has
In what
international
sense?
competitions in terms of club competitions?
Every
International-
confederation, the Copa Libertadores in South America, the African Champions League, the
Right.
Asian Champions
So
League,
those
all
are-
the confederations
those are-
have those.
Those are all geographic oligarchs, right? So these are all closed shops we're talking about. FIFA,
No, but
is a
that's-
closed shop.
It's
The World
that's
Cup is a
based on
closed shop.
geography.
So
That's based on geography. That's not based on how much money I'm making. That's just simply, okay, I'm an Asian country, so
Okay.
I can compete
So
only
if
in the
I
AFC Champions League.
if I want to start up an alternative Euros, is that going to be possible or not?
But why would you? I mean, I don't.
Yeah.
I'm not.
No,
I'm
all
not
I'm
understanding,
saying
because
is-
the Europe.
But you are banging your fist on the table saying, well, the new league's going to be a closed shop. Well, the Euros is already a
No,
closed
the
shop.
qualification is open. Any team in Europe can qualify for the Euros. Is
But in
that going to be
terms-
the case for
But in
the
terms of
European Super
sanction-
League?
in terms
No.
of the sanctioning body, they've got a closed shop.
I'm failing to understand your
You've
point.
got
Chris.
one. You've got
Any
one
team in
governing
Europe,
body.
any country in Europe, any country in Europe can qualify for the Euros. Any country in the world can qualify for the World Cup.
But who controls?
So obviously
Those
there will be
rules.
one controlling body for every for why. I
Okay.
mean, how
So
does
then
that
don't-
mean that it's a
then
closed shop?
Then don't use the term closed shop as this.
I mean closed shop in a sporting merit sense, as I said earlier, that those 15 teams, they could finish 20th in the Premier League, 15th in the Premier League, and still play in a European Super League the next season. That's the point I'm trying to make.
Yeah.
Whereas right now you need to finish in the top 4 to play in the Champions League, right? So there's no sense of sporting or your performances on the field being rewarded through through increased prize money, through winning competitions, through taking part in the elite sort of competitions. It's a case of, and also, just to make one last point, it will reward mediocrity, because what incentive will an Arsenal or Manchester United have? And when I say the names of those clubs, I mean the owners. What incentive will the owners have to invest further or to make further improvements to try and win the Premier League or to win these tournaments? Because their money is guaranteed. I mean, as long as I take part in the Super League every year, I'm getting 400 million. An extra 40 million is not going to make a difference. So I don't really need to make too many improvements to try and win that tournament. And the Premier League is now an irrelevance, right? Because I'm dominating the competition. Sure, because of that, I might just go on and win it a few years. The trophy will basically get passed around between these 6 clubs. It will absolutely reward mediocrity. I mean, look at the
Okay.
example of the Tampa Bay
I've got-
Buccaneers. Tampa Bay Buccaneers are owned by the Glazers, right? They won their first Super Bowl in 2002. It's taken them 18 years to win the next one? It's taken them 18 years to win the next playoff game, which is this year when they won the Super Bowl after 18 years.
Right.
So
But if you look at the number of teams that have won in the NFL versus the number of teams that have won in the Premier League in the same time, you've got more teams that have won in the NFL.
the reason
You
for
look at
that
the
is that
NBA,
there is
They're
a
built- they're
salary
structured.
cap.
Yeah, the
Yeah,
structure.
There's a
agree.
salary cap.
But what I'm
There's a
saying
drop-
is this: is the emperor has no clothes. The current system is broken now.
Agreed. But
And
I absolutely
so,
agree.
so something's got to change. And I'm glad that this European Super League is forcing some decisions to be made. My number one preference would be basically the German model, where fans own the clubs. That's where I'd like to ultimately get to. But I'm
Yeah,
tired
but
of
that's not
hearing.
going to happen,
I'm tired.
unfortunately.
I agree with that because of the capitalist model we all buy into. And by the way, I'm still a capitalist, but I think we need to make changes and recognize that capitalism ebbs and flows. And we've had crony capitalism in the past. We have to rein it in a bit. We have to rein it a bit in this situation too. So I just feel like this is the sort of thing where it is recognizing reality for what it is. The European Super League is recognizing reality for what it is. And until someone gives an alternative narrative, and the alternative narrative is let's just keep it the same it's been, that is the unacceptable answer, in my opinion. Dre, any final thoughts on this before we shift subjects?
Honestly, just to sum it up, I think at the end of the day, I think we're also we're assuming that this Super League is going to be, extremely competitive. But I was thinking about it while you guys were talking. Arsenal's not going to win it. Spurs are not going to win it. Milan's not going to win it. You know what I mean? I think it's when we look at, Champions League and who's been winning most recently and making it to the final, I think we're going to end up with a very similar outcome, if not now, very shortly. I think Madrid is going to end up very close to the top. Barca is going to end up very close, especially without Bayern and PSG. Yeah, so for me, I'm not a huge fan of it at the moment.
Mm-hmm. So Harshal, let's shift our attention to the almost story that barely created a heartbeat, is that Mourinho was fired by the Spurs. Was that a justified firing or not?
I think it was. Spurs, ever since, they went top of the table back in November, but since then, it's not been good enough. For the squad that Mourinho has at Spurs, the way they're playing right now is absolutely not good enough. I'll go back to a point you made earlier, Chris, about, say, Atletico Madrid and their style of play. Spurs have barely been anything more than a counter-attacking side under Mourinho, especially in the last couple of months or so. They've not, other than maybe flashes and glimpses against some teams where we've been a little more attacking and a little more adventurous. It's mostly been a case of sitting back, trying to defend a lead if they've got one, or say against a City or Liverpool, trying to obviously stop them from scoring and springing forward on the counter-attack and using Harry Kane and Son Heung-min when possible. So they have a very talented squad, to be honest. There are obviously some issues in some positions, but it's not as bad as Mourinho's made it out to be. And based on reports we've been seeing since the sacking on various news sites, he obviously fell out with the majority of the players, which is what I think he's been doing that for the last 2 or 3 jobs he's been in. And it's to me, I think it's clear, and it would have been great if we'd had David on, to be honest, because he's a big Mourinho fan. To me, it's clear that Mourinho's methods are outdated. He's a manager who worked brilliantly with the last generation of footballers, the likes of Frank Lampard, Didier Drogba, Michael Ballack, even Ronaldo to an extent, because Cristiano Ronaldo is also a bit of a throwback in terms of his mentality towards the game. His sort of confrontational leadership style of football, where he tries to provoke a reaction through criticism, does not work well with the modern footballer. The modern footballer, and in general, people today, say my generation or Dre's generation, or people younger than us, 17, 18-year-old kids, you need to sort of have a more accommodative approach. You need to sort of understand their concerns. You need to put an arm around their shoulder rather than sort of publicly lambasting them if they've made mistakes, and which he's done a lot in the last couple of months. He's thrown players under the bus quite a lot. So he definitely lost the dressing room. I think the only thing I can say is about the timing, where it seems curious to me that they did this when they have the Carabao Cup final against City on Saturday, but Daniel Levy probably thought they had a better chance of winning the final without him than with him. But other than that, this was bound to happen. It's just that it's happened in his second season, midway through his second season. It usually happens sometime in his third season, and he has a couple of trophies to show for it, but that's not been the case this time around.
Dre, what's your take?
Yeah, I think it's very similar to what Harshal outlined in terms of, whether anybody likes it or not, society has changed, and people are changing, and having that same approach that he's had, or that he used, 10 years ago, for example, is not going to have the same effects. And so, yeah, I mean, I think his man management style is a bit outdated probably at the time. And I mean, for the squad that he has, I don't necessarily think that it quite suits how he's played over the years as well. I think Tottenham definitely has the players to be more of an attacking outfit, and I think that's what they're probably looking for as well. And knocked out of Europa League and not where they would like to be in the Premier League. I'm not too surprised by it. I think definitely in the locker room, those relationships matter a lot, and when you lose those, it doesn't become a fun, or it doesn't stay a fun working environment, and one that you feel like can progress and improve. So not too surprised by it, I think.
So my take is as follows. First of all, I'm still upset at Daniel Levy for getting rid of Poch. I thought
I agree.
giving him more time, especially given the fact that they couldn't open up a checkbook to support him because they had to pay for the stadium. And you just kind of have to accept that reality for what it is. He went with this better looking, shinier new sports car. They cost an absolute fortune. And guess what? The car runs out of gas or malfunctions on the road. And that's Mourinho. And I agree with you in terms of the man management. In that sense, I do think it's a little unfair that you cut him loose and that you didn't give him any money for him to reshape the squad in his own philosophy. And so I think that's a bit unfair. Harshal,
I don't think that's necessarily the case. The Spurs, I mean, in a pandemic era where obviously Spurs have lost, as most clubs have, they've lost a lot of money. They did go out and spend. They bought Sergio Reguilon for 30 million from Real. They brought Gareth Bale in on a loan, which is expensive because they're paying, even though they're not paying the majority of his salary, even if they're paying 40 of half of it, it's still a lot of money to pay for a 31-year-old for the course of a season. They brought Pierre-Emile Højbjerg, yes, for 10 million, but I mean,
but that's
Mourinho did get a few players in. Mourinho did get some of the targets that he wanted, but it's also another thing with Mourinho is that he has always been a sort of I wouldn't say checkbook manager, but he is the kind of manager who demands new signings. And it's a way, another part of his man management style where he wants to shake up the squad and get a new face in, try and sort of challenge them and all of that. But a lot of times that's not possible, and you have to make the players you have at your disposal better.
He did it with not to cut you, Harshal, but the right back situation with Doherty. He brought in Doherty, and I remember it specifically because I'm a fan of Aurier. I like how he plays, and he essentially said, "All right, you're not going to play for me," and wanted to make Doherty the guy, and it doesn't work out that way. And now you have Aurier, and you don't have another right back, and you have to make that work now. And obviously, when you come in and you have that impact immediately, it's going to have its lasting effects regardless of how the situation pans out. And I think that just kind of goes throughout the locker room in whatever positions you want to pick out.
Mm-hmm. Interesting. Well, I am going to be curious to see who they bring on board. I hope it's somebody that believes in expansive football, because I think they have enough talent to do some expensive football. And you guys know I'm a stickler for entertainment. So I do like some entertaining football, which I guess means we should probably wrap our pod here, because we're going to have a very entertaining football match. Liverpool Leeds, of which I will watch with equal zest, irrespective of the European Football League or Super League coming together. I don't think this is going to be the last time we talk about it. And I look forward to unpacking it, because I think we all probably agree on kind of the capitalist system. I think we know there's shortcomings. As to whether we agree on the solutions to be had, we'll take future podcasts. So, gentlemen, thank you very much for this. We'll leave the podcast here. We are sponsored by the Premier League Guide, Moneyball for Football, Opposition Analysis plus Eye Candy. The current update is available at www.thinkingfanmedia.com and on Amazon. For now, bella ciao, ciao, ciao.